Container gardening's biggest mistakes. 8 plants that'll destroy your patio garden. My name is Sam, and over 3 decades of container gardening, I've burned through hundreds of dollars on plants that promised beauty but delivered heartbreak. These aren't small problems. We're talking about flowers that will completely take over your space, drain your wallet, and make you want to give up gardening forever. I'm about to reveal 8 specific plants that nearly ruined my container garden, including one that cost me $300 in just one growing season, and another that's still haunting my patio 3 years later. If you make even one of these mistakes, you'll understand why I'm so passionate about sharing this with you. Welcome to Seniors Gardening Advice, where experienced gardeners share real wisdom that actually works. I've spent 30-plus years turning my small patio into a container paradise, but the road here was paved with expensive mistakes that taught me everything I know. Before we jump into these costly errors, do me a favor, hit that subscribe button and ring that notification bell. We release practical gardening content every single week, and I guarantee you'll learn something new that saves you time and money. Trust me, the information I'm sharing is worth its weight in gold. Now, let me tell you about the absolute worst plant I ever put in a container.
Plant number 1, mint, the permanent invader that never leaves. 3 years ago, I planted chocolate mint because it smelled amazing and had pretty purple flowers. It seemed ideal for my herb container setup, useful, attractive, and small. I had no idea I was about to create a green monster that would take over everything. Here's what gardening books don't tell you about mint. It belongs to the mint family and spreads using underground runners called rhizomes. These horizontal stems can travel 2 to 4 feet from the original plant, staying hidden in the soil for years before suddenly sprouting up. Within just one season, my mint had escaped through drainage holes and started new colonies all over my patio. It appeared in other containers, pushed through concrete cracks, and even showed up in houseplants that I'd temporarily placed outside. The underground runners are incredibly tough. They can grow from soil pieces as small as 1 inch and squeeze through openings as narrow as a 1/4 inch. The real problem was how mint bullies other plants. Its aggressive roots strangle nearby plants, stealing their water and food until only mint survives. Mint actually releases special chemicals that stop other plants from growing properly. It's like chemical warfare happening right in your containers. I tried everything to control it: root barriers, raised containers, even containers sitting inside other containers. The mint always found a way through or around every barrier I built. Professional landscapers use barriers that go at least 18 inches deep and stick up 2 inches above the soil, but even then, mint can jump over by sending shoots up and over the top. 3 years later, I'm still finding mint sprouts in the strangest places. Last month, I discovered mint growing in my rain gutter above the patio. I have no clue how it got there, but clearly I underestimated this plant's determination. Mint spreads through seeds carried by birds and wind, plus tiny root pieces that stick to your shoes and tools. Every time you disturb the soil or move containers, you risk spreading microscopic root fragments that can grow into full plants. If you absolutely must grow mint, use a completely sealed container with no drainage holes touching the ground and check monthly for escapes. Better yet, keep it indoors on a windowsill where you can watch it closely. Use a pot that's at least 12 inches deep with solid walls and no bottom drainage touching soil. But mint's sneaky spreading is nothing compared to the financial disaster of plant number 2. Don't forget to like this video if you're learning something valuable. It really helps other gardeners find this content.
Plant number 2, Dahlias, the $300 beauty queens. Dahlias create some of the most gorgeous flowers you can grow, which is exactly why I invested big money in premium tubers. I'm talking about paying $15 to $30 per tuber for the showstopper varieties. Let me explain why dahlias are so expensive and demanding. They come from the mountains of Mexico and Guatemala, where they experience clear, wet, and dry seasons. They've developed to store energy in underground tubers during dry periods, but this survival trick creates major headaches for container gardeners in cooler climates. In cold areas, dahlias aren't permanent plants in containers. Every fall, you must dig up the tubers, clean them off, dry them properly, and store them in perfect conditions all winter long. The storage needs are incredibly specific. Temperatures between 40 and 50 degrees, humidity between 50 and 60%, and good air movement. Too wet and they rot from bacteria or fungus. Too dry and they shrivel up and die. Too warm and they start growing too early, using up all their stored energy. My first year, I lost 60% of my tubers to storage problems. That's $180 worth of tubers that never saw a second season. I learned that tubers need to cure for 2 weeks after digging, then get stored in slightly damp peat moss or vermiculite, checked every month for rot or drying out. Dinner plate dahlias need serious support systems. We're talking about 6-foot stakes driven deep into containers, multiple ties that need adjusting weekly as plants grow, and constant watching during storm season. These varieties can produce flower heads 10 to 12 inches across that weigh over a pound when wet from rain or watering. I thought I had the staking figured out until one August thunderstorm taught me an expensive lesson. The storm toppled my entire dahlia display. The stakes held fine, but the containers didn't. Heavy ceramic pots shattered, premium potting mix scattered everywhere, and several prized dahlias snapped at ground level. Container-grown dahlias are extra vulnerable because they lack the deep anchoring roots they'd have if planted in the ground. Between weekly staking adjustments, removing dead flowers to encourage more blooms, controlling pests like aphids and spider mites, and preparing for storage, each dahlia container needed about 30 minutes of care per week. With 12 dahlia containers, that's 6 hours weekly just for dahlias. Compare this to low-maintenance flowers that need maybe 15 minutes per month. For spectacular blooms without the drama, try large-flowered begonias or hibiscus. Begonias produce flowers up to 6 inches across in similar colors, stay naturally compact, and don't need winter storage. Hibiscus offers equally dramatic blooms, and if you choose hardy varieties, they can survive winter in containers with simple protection. Share this video with a fellow gardener who might be considering dahlias. You could save them hundreds of dollars.
Plant number 3, Nasturtiums, the aphid magnet disaster. Every seed catalog markets nasturtiums as easy, foolproof, and perfect for beginners. They're supposed to do well in poor soil and dry conditions. What could possibly go wrong? Here's the scientific reason nasturtiums become pest magnets. They contain high levels of oils called glucosinolates that actually attract aphids instead of keeping them away. While this makes them useful trap crops in big gardens where they can be kept separate, it's a disaster in container collections where everything sits close together. Nasturtiums are aphid magnets, and I don't mean just a few aphids. I mean plague-level swarms of these pests. Every single nasturtium plant became a breeding colony for thousands of aphids. A single aphid can reproduce without mating, creating 50 to 100 babies in just 1 week under good conditions, which containers provide perfectly. Aphids can multiply from dozens to thousands in 1 month. The real problem is, aphids don't stay put. They used my nasturtiums as a home base to attack every other container on my patio. Aphids have 2 reproduction phases, a wingless phase for rapid local breeding and a winged phase for spreading to new plants. My peppers, herbs, and flowers all became victims. I tried soap sprays, neem oil, beneficial insects, even picking them off by hand. Nothing worked, because the nasturtiums kept producing new aphids faster than I could get rid of them. Aphids can develop resistance to treatments when populations are huge, and they reproduce so fast that even 99% control leaves enough survivors to rebuild the colony. The breaking point came when I realized the nasturtiums were doing something even worse than attracting aphids.
The constant aphid problems led to sooty mold, which contaminated the potting mix. Sooty mold grows on the honeydew that aphids produce, a sticky, sugary substance that coats leaves and creates perfect conditions for other fungal infections. Even after removing the nasturtiums, the soil stayed unhealthy and had to be completely replaced. Sooty mold doesn't just affect infected plants, it can survive in soil and organic matter for months, creating ongoing problems for any new plants you put in contaminated containers. Between pest control products, replacement plants for aphid-damaged containers, and new potting soil, my cheap and easy nasturtiums cost me over $150 in one season. The irony is, nasturtium seeds cost less than $5 for a packet, making this one of the most expensive bargains I've ever encountered. Nasturtiums can work as trap crops, but only if placed far from your main containers and treated as sacrificial plants. Professional pest management recommends placing trap crops at least 50 feet away from valuable plants, impossible in most container garden settings.
Plant number 4. Morning Glory, the aggressive vine that takes over everything. Morning Glory looked innocent enough at the garden center, but within one season it had completely invaded 3 of my containers and was creeping into my neighbor's yard. Morning Glory seemed like the perfect choice for my vertical containers. The picture showed gorgeous trumpet-shaped flowers cascading beautifully. What they didn't show was the nightmare that followed. Morning Glories belong to the same family as sweet potatoes and have the same aggressive growing habits. In their native habitat, they can grow up to 15 feet in a single season. In containers, this means complete domination. Within 8 weeks, my Morning Glories had completely covered my tomato cages, wrapped around my patio furniture, and started climbing the walls of my house. These vines grew 3 inches per day during peak season. That's over 12 feet of growth per month under good conditions. When I tried to remove them, I discovered they had wound themselves so tightly around my other plants that I had to sacrifice an entire container of petunias just to get them out. Morning Glories have a twisting growth pattern that spirals clockwise, and once they grab onto something, they won't let go. The root system made everything worse. Morning Glories develop what's called a taproot system, a deep central root with smaller side roots spreading outward. The roots had not only filled the entire container, but had grown through drainage holes and into the ground beneath. Even after removing all visible growth, they kept sprouting back from root pieces I couldn't reach. Morning Glories can regrow from root pieces as small as 2 inches long. Here's something most gardeners don't know. Morning Glory seeds have an extremely hard seed coat that can stay alive in soil for up to 50 years. Even if you think you've eliminated the plant, seeds can sprout years later when conditions are right. Professional landscapers classify Morning Glories as invasive species in many regions for exactly this reason. The lesson: never underestimate vigorous climbing plants in containers. If you want cascading flowers, try sweet potato vine or bacopa instead. Sweet potato vine gives you the same lush foliage without the aggressive twining behavior, while bacopa provides delicate cascading flowers that stay contained. Comment below if you've had your own Morning Glory horror stories. I'd love to hear them.
Plant number 5. Zinnias, the disease magnet that spreads problems. Zinnias are supposed to be foolproof flowers, drought-tolerant, colorful, great for beginners. They seemed perfect for my sunny containers, or so I thought. Here's the science behind why zinnias are so susceptible to problems. Zinnias come from hot, dry regions of Mexico, where they grow in well-ventilated, open spaces. Container gardening creates the opposite environment, humid microclimates with poor air circulation, which is exactly what fungal diseases love. By mid-July, every single zinnia container looked like it had been dusted with flour. Powdery mildew had taken over, turning my vibrant flowers into ghostly white disasters. Powdery mildew is a parasite that literally feeds on the plant's nutrients through specialized structures.
This fungal disease thrives in the exact conditions my patio provided. Warm days around 70 to 80 degrees, cool nights, and the dense planting that containers encourage. The temperature difference creates condensation, and when you pack plants tightly together for that full, lush look, you eliminate the air circulation that would normally keep leaves dry. Here's something most gardeners miss. Powdery mildew doesn't actually need free water to infect plants. Unlike most fungal diseases that require moisture, powdery mildew spores can germinate and infect at relative humidity as low as 50%. This makes it particularly problematic in container gardens where humidity gets trapped around plants. Worse yet, the mildew didn't stay contained. It jumped to my marigolds, my dahlias, even my vegetable containers. Powdery mildew spores are carried by wind and can travel up to 100 meters, but in my patio's confined space, they didn't need to go far. Within 2 weeks, my entire patio garden looked like a botanical graveyard. The disease also weakens plants by blocking photosynthesis. The right fungal growth on leaves reduces the plant's ability to produce energy, leading to stunted growth, reduced flowering, and increased susceptibility to other stresses like heat and drought. I tried every organic treatment I could find, but here's what nobody tells you about powdery mildew. Once it establishes itself, it's nearly impossible to eliminate completely. The fungus produces specialized survival structures that can overwinter and reinfect plants the following season. I spent over $80 on organic fungicides and dedicated 2 hours every week to treatment applications. Even with aggressive treatment, half my zinnias never recovered their full beauty. The solution isn't avoiding zinnias entirely, it's choosing mildew-resistant varieties, like Profusion series, which were specifically bred for disease resistance, and giving them proper spacing in containers. That means fewer plants per pot than you'd think. Aim for 6 to 8 inches between plants instead of the 4 inches most gardeners use.
Plant #6, giant sunflowers, the physics-defying disaster. Giant sunflowers in containers seemed like such a fun project. Imagine 8-foot sunflowers towering over my patio, creating natural shade and producing seeds for the birds. Let me share some sunflower facts that seed companies don't emphasize. A mature sunflower head can weigh 2 to 4 pounds when fully developed with seeds. The stalk itself becomes top-heavy because sunflowers exhibit heliotropism. They follow the sun throughout the day, which creates constant stress on the stem and container. What I didn't consider was physics. These massive flowers act like sails in the wind. The surface area of a large sunflower head can be over 100 square inches, and when you multiply that by wind speed, you're looking at tremendous force. Every storm meant toppled containers, broken stems, and damaged patio furniture. A 20-mile-per-hour wind hitting a large sunflower head creates approximately 40 pounds of lateral force. Imagine that force applied to a plant in a container that might only weigh 50 pounds total. It's like trying to balance a basketball on a pencil in a windstorm. I ended up spending more on support systems than on the plants themselves. Heavy-duty stakes, guy wires, and weighted container bases. For proper support, you need stakes that are at least 2/3 the height of the mature plant, driven at least 18 inches deep into the container. My patio looked like a construction site. Container size becomes critical with giant sunflowers. You need at least a 20-gallon container for stability, and even then you're fighting physics. Most gardeners try to grow them in standard 5 or 10-gallon containers, which is a recipe for disaster. Then came the wildlife invasion. What started as a few cute birds became aerial raids by entire flocks. A single large sunflower head can contain 1,000 to 2,000 seeds, each packed with high-energy oils and proteins. Squirrels discovered the seeds and began destroying not just the sunflowers, but digging through all my containers looking for buried treasures.
The birds also created an unexpected problem. With dozens of birds visiting daily, my patio furniture, walkways, and other plants were constantly covered in bird droppings. It became a sanitation issue that required daily cleaning. I thought I could protect the seeds with netting, but that created an even bigger problem. The netting trapped small birds, created trip hazards for me, and when storms hit, it turned into a tangled mess that damaged neighboring plants. I spent an entire weekend untangling netting from my entire patio setup, and even had to call a wildlife rescue service when a cardinal got its wing caught. If you love sunflowers, stick to dwarf varieties like teddy bear or music box mix. These varieties max out at 2 to 3 feet tall, have smaller heads that weigh less than half a pound, and their shorter stature means better wind resistance. They give you the sunflower charm without the engineering challenges. Hit that subscribe button if this is helping you avoid expensive mistakes. We've got more money-saving tips coming your way.
Plant number 7, Impatiens, the water-guzzling bills that broke the bank. Impatiens were my go-to shade flower for years. They're colorful, bloom continuously, and look absolutely stunning in containers. So, what's the problem? Let me explain why impatiens are such water hogs. These plants have thin, succulent-like stems that store very little water, and their leaves have a high surface area that promotes rapid water loss. In botanical terms, they have a high water uptake rate but low water retention capacity. These beautiful flowers are basically water addicts. In the heat of summer, my impatiens containers needed water twice a day, morning and evening. Miss one watering session, and you'd come home to completely collapsed plants that looked like they were dying. The wilting happens because impatiens have a shallow root system that can't access deep moisture reserves like other plants. I calculated that my impatiens alone were responsible for a 40% increase in my summer water bill. That's an extra $200 just to keep these flowers alive. To put this in perspective, a single large impatiens container can require up to 2 gallons of water per day during peak summer heat. Here's something most gardeners don't realize. Impatiens actually evolved in the understory of tropical forests, where they receive consistent moisture from daily rainfall and high humidity. When we place them in containers on sunny patios, we're asking them to survive in conditions completely opposite to their natural habitat. Then came the downy mildew epidemic. This fungal disease hit nationwide starting around 2012, and my containers weren't spared. The disease thrives in cool, wet conditions, exactly what container gardens provide with frequent watering and poor air circulation. Within days, healthy plants turned into brown, soggy messes. The disease cycle is particularly vicious because the spores can spread through water splash, which means every time you water, you're potentially spreading the infection. The pathogen also produces specialized spores that can survive winter temperatures and remain dormant in soil for years. I lost 12 containers worth of impatiens in 1 week. But the real shock came when I tried to replant. The fungus had contaminated the soil, meaning I couldn't just replant. Downy mildew spores can survive in soil for up to 3 years, waiting for new host plants. I had to dispose of all the potting mix and start completely over. That's $150 worth of premium potting soil down the drain. Instead, try New Guinea impatiens. They're more drought-tolerant because they have thicker, more succulent stems, and they're genetically resistant to downy mildew. Or go with begonias for similar color impact with half the water needs. Begonias have waxy leaves that reduce water loss and deeper root systems for better drought tolerance.
Plant number 8, Petunias, the mid-season collapse queens. Petunias start out as container superstars. Early season growth is vigorous, flowers are abundant, and they look absolutely stunning, cascading from hanging baskets. This is exactly why their mid-season collapse is so heartbreaking. The problem with petunias lies in their growth habit and genetic programming. Petunias are naturally short-lived perennials that evolved in South America's temperate regions. They're programmed for a burst of early reproduction followed by energy conservation, exactly the opposite of what we want for season-long container displays. By July, every Petunia container looked terrible. The plants became ledgy and stretched. Flowers became sparse and small, and the overall effect went from garden center perfect to college dorm neglect.
This happens because petunias exhibit what botanists call apical dominance. The main growing tips suppress side branching, leading to long, spindly stems with flowers only at the ends. I tried deadheading, fertilizing, even cutting them back by half, but they never regained their early season glory. The fundamental issue is that petunias need cool night temperatures, ideally between 60 and 65 degrees, to produce compact bushy growth. When nights stay warm, as they do in most summer climates, the plants stretch regardless of care. Handling petunias for maintenance is unpleasant. They're incredibly sticky and leave a resin on your hands that's difficult to wash off. This stickiness comes from glandular hairs on the stems and leaves that secrete a protective resin. Every deadheading session left me scrubbing my hands with dish soap, and the resin can actually cause skin irritation in sensitive individuals. Petunias are prima donnas about weather. Heavy rain turns the flowers to mush because the delicate petals absorb water and become too heavy for their stems. Wind shreds the delicate petals, and even morning dew can cause flower collapse in humid conditions. The flowers are essentially tissue paper with no structural reinforcement. Container-grown petunias are particularly vulnerable because they lack the deep root system that would help them weather stress. In containers, their shallow roots dry out quickly, leading to stress that makes their natural tendency toward legginess even worse. For the same cascading effect with better staying power, try Calabricoa or Bacopa. Calabricoa, also called million bells, is actually related to petunias, but has been bred for heat tolerance and compact growth. They maintain their beauty all season without the midsummer collapse. Bacopa produces masses of small white or blue flowers and actually improves as temperatures rise, making it perfect for the dog days of summer when petunias fail.
The lesson? Choose plants that thrive, not just survive. There you have it. 8 plants that taught me expensive lessons so you don't have to learn them the hard way. Mint's permanent invasion, Dahlias' high maintenance demands, Nasturtiums' pest attraction, Morning Glory's aggression, Zinnias' disease issues, Sunflower's structural problems, Impatiens' water addiction, and Petunia's mid-season collapse. Learning from these mistakes transformed my container gardening success. My current containers are lower maintenance, more reliable, and actually more beautiful because I choose plants that thrive instead of just survive. Next week on Seniors Gardening Advice, I'm sharing the 10 flowers that have never let me down in containers. Plants that are beautiful, reliable, and actually get better as the season progresses. Don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you don't miss it. Like this video if it saved you from making expensive mistakes, and share it with fellow gardeners who need this information. Drop a comment below telling me which of these plants you've struggled with. I read every single comment. Thanks for watching Seniors Gardening Advice, where experience meets practical wisdom. Happy gardening, and remember, every mistake is just a lesson in disguise.